the Broccoli's have relinquished control of the James Bond property to Amazon and MGM, and this has me nervous. The Broccoli's have controlled the James Bond franchise for the last 60 plus years. They have ushered in all of the reboots, all of the new castings, all of the movies. They have had full creative control. They've protected the legacy of this iconic character, and the fact that they were fighting with Amazon a couple weeks ago and talking about how they couldn't see eye to eye, and now they've relinquished the rights to control James Bond, I am really scared for the property. They understood that James Bond isn't something to get 46 spin-offs and 15 movies a year. They understood that James Bond is an event film. It's like the World Cup. It's like the Super Bowl. The Super Bowl only happened once every couple years. It's something that doesn't happen very often, but when it does, it is this big monumental event that everyone rushes to see. James Bond is one of the most iconic characters in cinematic history, and the fact that they were fighting with Amazon around the direction to go is what has me the most nervous, because clearly Amazon just wrote them a giant, fat, juicy check to go away. They bought the rights to James Bond and MGM a couple years ago. They wanted to take it in a new direction that the Broccoli's didn't agree with, which is concerning because they know what makes James Bond work. And look, they haven't always made great James Bond movies. I mean, Quantum of Solace wasn't that good, even though that was done during the writer's strike. They've put out some stinkers, but they've also put out some of the greatest James Bond films ever made. And the fact, again, I keep going back to this, that they were fighting with Amazon and now they're gone, tells me that Amazon wants to do something that the Broccoli's didn't agree with. And I can only imagine it's that they want to put out more James Bond than just once every 3 years, which some people are probably like, yeah, that's great. But what's going to happen is it's going to dilute the James Bond franchise. They're going to put out a James Bond movie, then they're going to put out a spin-off about Q trying to figure things out by using computers, and they're going to put out a Moneypenny spin-off, then they're going to put out this spin-off, then they're going to do a spin-off of 009, because who gives a shit about that guy? And then if they're not great, it's just going to bring down people's expectations and excitement for a James Bond film. And again, James Bond has been a movie theater juggernaut. And I'm afraid that Amazon is going to stick this on Amazon Prime, where it's not going to make any money and it's not going to get the box office sensation that it would get if it went to theaters. I'm afraid that Amazon isn't going to do as good of a job at vetting the writers and the cast here. I mean, you had Jeff Bezos go online and ask the fans who they want to see cast as James Bond. And of course, everyone picked Henry Cavill. I get that. I would love Henry Cavill to be James Bond if this was like 10 years ago. But one of the things the Broccoli did really well is they got an idea first. They got a story first, and then they had a director go out and pick whoever was the best person to portray that story, that new iteration of Bond, where just off the bat, it seems like Jeff Bezos is like, we're going to cast somebody and make a movie around them. And that's not the way you do things. Now, look, Amazon has put out a lot of great stuff. You got the Fallout adaptation, that's like the video game turned to TV series by Christopher Nolan's brother, Jonathan Nolan. That was really good. You have The Boys. They've done a lot of really good stuff. So is there a chance that they could put out a fantastic James Bond film? Yeah, there is. I'm not going to discredit that from them. I mean, that's definitely a possibility. But again, they were fighting with the Broccoli's for a reason, and that reason is unknown to me. And it's that gray area that scares me, because I don't want to see them dilute this brand. I don't want to feel like I'm getting a James Bond-like show in the world of James Bond every other month, because then it's not going to make me as excited to see James Bond when it finally comes out. And I'm not going to be excited if they just dump a James Bond film on Amazon Prime. That is not where it belongs. You don't do James Bond dirty like that. James Bond is iconic, and he deserves to be in the movies. And at the end of the day, they could put it in the theater. Amazon has put movies in the movie theater. Manchester by the Sea was one of my favorite films of all time that was done by Amazon that they put in theaters, but they really did that because they knew it was an Oscar contender, and in order to win an Oscar, those movies have to go into theaters for a limited time. I think it's like 2 weeks to be able to qualify for an Oscar. So that's why a lot of streamers put a lot of movies in theaters that are like that, because Netflix wants to be able to say, hey, we have a movie that won an Oscar. Amazon wants to be able to say, hey, we have a movie that won an Oscar. Apple Plus wants to be able to say, hey, we have multiple movies that won Oscars. That's what they want, but they know James Bond isn't going to win an Oscar. So what's better, put it out in a theater or put it on Amazon, where that's the only place people can go to see it? Let's drive our subscribers up. Let's get our views up. Let's get our advertisements in there for all the shit you could buy on Amazon. Again, I don't know if that's what they're going to do, but it's really scary that that is what they could do. I would have felt a lot better if this went to like Warner Brothers or Sony or Universal, but it's not. it went to a streaming service, so only time will tell what the fate of one of my favorite movie characters of all time is. There is one silver lining though, one, and that is that Christopher Nolan originally wanted to do a James Bond film, but said he would only do it if he had full creative control, and he would have made it a period piece that took place like in like the 1920s and 30s, which I think would be awesome. And although I don't know if he himself will do it because he has such a big behemoth of a movie on his plate right now with the Odyssey, and Amazon's gonna want to start rolling into James Bond right now that they have the green light to start doing that because the Broccoli's aren't interfering. What I think they could do is hire Jonathan Nolan, who did Fallout, who did Westworld, to come and helm this, and he can work with his brother, Christopher Nolan, and have Nolan help him write the script, and we will get like a pseudo, yes, it's a Jonathan Nolan James Bond film, but with help in the writing department from his brother Christopher Nolan, which in my opinion is the greatest director working today. So if that happens, that is definitely something I can get behind and get excited about, because Nolan loves James Bond. Both of them, both Jonathan and Christopher Nolan, they both talked about how much they love that character and how they grew up idolizing that character. So with that silver lining, I have some hope. And I think that Amazon would be silly to not even consider it because of how much Christopher Nolan has expressed wanting to make a movie. They got the next best thing in Jonathan Nolan, who's just gotten a fat check to make whatever he wants because of how popular the Fallout show was. And that show won Emmys. So who knows? We might get a James Bond film done by a Nolan. Anyway, what do you guys think about the Broccoli surrendering the rights to James Bond? Are you excited about it now that Amazon can kind of do their own thing? Maybe you love all the stuff that Amazon's done, so you see this as an absolute win, or maybe you're just as scared as I am. If you are, let's talk about it in the comments down below, guys. And as always, I hope you have a great rest of your weekend, and I'll catch you next time.